Hello, my dear friends. You're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 29th of September of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And as for the end of the 29th of September, the most important question is whether the United States of America will provide Ukrainians with Tomahawk missiles. Today we got a lot of very interesting statements made by US authorities on this matter. The Russians have refused to sit down with any bilateral or trilateral meetings. The Russians have got to wake up and accept reality here. J.D. Vance wants Russia to negotiate with Zelensky. Later, he emphasized that US authorities are discussing the possibility of supplying Tomahawk missiles to NATO for transfer to Kiev, with the final decision resting with Trump, said US Vice President Vance. Later, another very important person of US reported that the US has not yet decided whether to approve the transfer of Tomahawk missiles from NATO stockpiles for delivery to Ukraine. According to General Kellogg, Zelensky has been actively pushing for such supplies. So we don't know for sure whether the United States of America have sent these missiles already or not, but obviously due to the fact that they began talking like this, most likely the US will provide Ukrainians with these missiles. And later, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Sybiga, made another very interesting statement on this matter. Ukrainian Foreign Minister makes loud threats against Russia. As of today, there is not a single safe place in Russia. Ukrainian weapons will reach any Russian military facility, declared the Ukrainian Foreign Minister. This statement is related to the US granting permission to strike Russian territory with long-range weapons, which gives Kiev additional capabilities. Of course, the question is whether this is a real situation or it's just a bluff from the Ukrainian side. You know that maybe as of the 29th of September of 2025, the Minister of Foreign Affairs Sybiga was bluffing that he's going to attack Russia right now, today. But anyway, we believe that sooner or later this bluff will turn into the reality. Another important article was published today by different sources that today roughly a dozen US Air Force aerial refueling tankers are currently up from a number of air bases across the United States, heading northeast and preparing to cross the Atlantic towards Europe, with several appearing to be en route to England. So we know that this is not something new. We saw the same thing happen before the Iran war started in June. So something is big right now is happening between the United States of America, Europe, and Ukraine. So we obviously say that the Western countries are reinforcing their positions along the border with Belarus and the Russian Federation. NATO wants to create a permanent air defense mission in Europe. So we see another round of escalation. Zelensky most likely will get his Tomahawk missiles, and most likely Ukraine will begin attacking deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. The question is whether the Russians are going to strike back, and most likely the answer is yes. Russia will strike back. The question probably is the kind of damage the Russians will deal to Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. The Russians continue attacking Ukrainian energy facilities all over the entire territory of Ukraine. Today we got another video. For example, here we can see another energy substation in the vicinity of the city by the name of Konotop, and here we can see how Russians began attacking this territory with missiles and with drones. And as you can see, as a result of this attack, this facility was completely destroyed. This is not the first attack that was carried out by Russians in September in this part of Ukraine. If you remember, a few days ago, another attack took place in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Chernigov, to the south in the area of the city by the name of Nezhin. Here we can see the same situation. The Russians attacked another energy facility object and fuel refinery. So the Russians are concentrated to destroy as many as possible Ukrainian positions, energy facilities, because Russians understand that most likely this upcoming winter is going to be very long and very cold, most likely for Ukrainians. Zelensky understands this as well, and he is trying to do everything he can with the purpose to force the Russian Federation not to attack energy facilities all over the entire territory of Ukraine. So this is the battle for facilities, and the battle who is able to force another side to do what they want. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. The Russians of the Group of Forces East continue their offensive, and as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to answer the village by the name of Verbova. We came to this conclusion based on the video that was published by Ukrainian forces. In this video we can see how Ukrainians were hunting Russians in this area, and when they found Russian positions, they began bombing this territory with artillery and FPV drones. This episode took place exactly in this place. We believe that the eastern part of the settlement is under complete Russian control. And right before we started making this video, several very reliable pro-Russian resources reported that as a result of clashes, the entire village of Verbova was captured by Russians. The Russians, as you can see, it seems are unstoppable, and most likely they will continue moving further in the direction of Vishnyovo. As we discussed in the previous video, if Russians are able to establish control over the settlement of Vishnyovo, they will be able to block Ukrainians from the settlement of Pokrovska. They will not allow the Ukrainians from the city of Pokrovska to move further in the southern direction, and from these positions the Russians will continue offensive towards the Uspenovka fortified area. As for the settlement of Pokrovska, today several resources reported that huge fire anomaly was recorded on the territory of the settlement, on the top, on the bottom, and the top banks of the settlement along the river of Volcha, which means that the Russians began bombing this territory, trying to reduce Ukrainian logistic capabilities. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Currently, we have two active zones where very heavy clashes were recorded. The first one is the city of Mirnograd, more precisely its northern part, more precisely the eastern part of its northern part. During the previous 24 hours, the pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian resources published two videos. In this video, we can see that the most eastern part of the settlement was covered with smokescreen, which means that the Russians began bombing and attacking this territory with all types of caliber they have. Most likely this is not just an artillery preparation, this is something bigger. The Russians most likely this upcoming night will make first attempts to answer the city of Mirnograd from the east with the purpose to break through Ukraine defense and to dig in deeper in the city itself. The second video was published almost from the same area, and here we can see the same story. The Russians were bombing the central part of the northern part of the city of Mirnograd heavily, with all types of calibers they have, basically reducing the central part of the city to ruins. Obviously, we don't need more proofs to confirm that those that was something like an artillery preparation or even something bigger. Furthermore, the official channel of the 79th Brigade, not the official, but probably the channel of a soldier who has connections with the 79th Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, reported that they were redeployed in the direction of the city of Mirnograd, more precisely towards its eastern part, with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to establish defense and not to allow the Russians to break through this area. So it seems that very heavy clashes are going to take place in coming probably hours, or maybe clashes have already started. So let's wait and see. Maybe tomorrow we're gonna have additional changes on the ground in the Russian favor, and we will color the eastern part of the city of Mirnograd as the territory under complete control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Now let's talk about the area of breakthrough. Today, the chief of the General Staff of the Armored Forces of Ukraine, Seversk, reported that the Russians were caught in cauldron by the Armored Forces of Ukraine, that Ukrainians managed to liberate up to 200 square kilometers or even more. So he's trying to tell us that the initiative is completely in Ukrainian hands and that the situation for Russians is very difficult. But these are just words without any proof, without any video that can confirm this. For example, when talking about different mappers, they reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions. The Russians recaptured the village of Zaporizhzhia that was captured by Ukrainians several days ago. The Russians managed to regroup themselves and counterattack and to encircle Ukrainians who are currently located to the west of the settlement of Boykovka. Furthermore, today pro-Ukraine resources published this video, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation on the territory of the settlement by the name of Kucherov Yar. So this village used to be considered as a gray zone or contested area. Today we got first proofs that confirm Russian control over the territory. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. So as you can see, we have two types of proofs, two types of statements about the situation in this area, statements made by Ukrainian sources without proofs, and video, geolocations, and opinions of different experts that the situation is completely opposite to the statements that were made by Seversk. So it seems that the Russians managed to break through the situation in their favor to get the initiative in their hands, and as we can see according to these videos, the Russians during the previous 24 hours improved their positions in the area of breakthrough. Another important video is coming from the territory of the settlement of Shakhova, more precisely from the area between the settlements of Shakhova and Vladimirovka. Here we can see how Russians were bombing the logistic road of the armed forces of Ukraine between two villages with artillery and FPV drones. So as you can see, the Russians established complete control over the territory, they control the traffic along this road, and they don't allow the Ukrainians to bring additional forces to the south. And the question is how the Ukrainians are planning to improve their positions to the south of the bridge if the bridge is destroyed and if the bridge is under complete Russian control. So as we discussed, currently we see that either the Russians or the Ukrainians are living in these illusions, and most likely in coming days these illusions or someone's illusions are going to crush. Now let's talk about the city of Constantinovka. During the previous 24 hours, lots of videos were published by Russians of how they were attacking and destroying Ukrainian vehicles, armored vehicles, positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the entire city of Constantinovka. Lots of explosions, lots of attacks were recorded. We see that Russians established complete control over the settlement. Ukrainians are trying to build some protection nets, but it doesn't help them. So the situation, as we can see, is very critical. The Russians are still preparing the city of Constantinovka before the beginning of the major offensive operation, which is going to start very, very soon, but this offensive still hasn't been started. Now let's talk about the city of Seversk. The situation here is also very critical and difficult for Ukrainians. Today, pro-Russian resources published this video, where we can see how a soldier of the armored force of the Russian Federation was clearing trenches, strongholds, and fortifications of the armored forces of Ukraine along the railways between the city of Vyimka and the city of Seversk. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map, we have colored this territory in Russian favor. So we see that Russians continue offensive operation and they're getting very close to the city of Seversk itself. Currently, the distance between possible positions, geolocated positions of the armored forces of Ukraine and the city of Seversk itself is already less than 4 kilometers, more precisely 3 kilometers and 140 meters, which is already nothing. Currently, the Russians are about to answer the village of Zvanovka, and if Russians take under control the village of Zvanovka, we believe that the battle for Seversk will begin automatically. As for the city itself, as we discussed in the previous video, the Russians established complete FPV drone control over the entrance and exit of the city. For example, in this video, we can see how Ukrainians were trying to escape the city, but their vehicle was damaged and destroyed by Russian FPV drone attack. In this video, we can see the opposite picture. The Ukrainians were trying to answer the city of Seversk, probably to bring additional reinforcements, reserves, or some arms supply, but the vehicle was destroyed somewhere in the middle of the road. Another video took place in the northwestern part, where Russians managed to discover another position of the FPV drone operator of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area, and then Russians attacked this territory with artillery and the temporary deployment point was destroyed. So Russians control the situation above the city, but without any attempt to attack it. As for the Liman direction, the main changes are taking place in two places. The first one is the settlement of Yampol. Today, pro-Russian resources and neutral mappers confirm that the Russians currently control up to 20-25% of the settlement of Yampol. We have proofs that confirm the Russian presence there. As for the northwestern part of the Liman direction, today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the units of the group of forces west managed to establish complete control over the settlement by the name of Shandryholove. Based on this video, we haven't adjusted anything, just this small part along the river of Nitrius, because we colored the village of Shandryholove a long time ago based on the geolocations. But today we got not just geolocations, but also the proof published by the Minister of Defense. And later, the Russian resources published this video where we can see how exactly the battle for the settlement was taking place. Here we can see how Russians were clearing one building after another, and in the final part of this video we can see how Russian soldiers were raising the Russian flag in different parts of the settlement. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the battle for the settlement over, and now the Russians are planning to move further, either in the western direction towards the river Voskol, or in the southeastern direction towards the settlement of Drobyshevo, and then automatically towards the city of Liman. And the battle for the city most likely is going to take place this year. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.